Hey, welcome to the Vintage Vibe, where this week we've got something special. Yeah, at least I hope you enjoy it. I happen to come across a rare, I'll give you a little clue here, trio of gear, and that happens to be the preamplifier, the matching tuner, and the behemoth, Mamba Jamba power amplifier. In fact, I've only come across this power amplifier one other time, and that was 13 years back. Never had a chance to listen to it kind of ensembled, as it was meant to be heard back in the 70s. So I'm pretty stoked, just about that alone. Now back to the rarity. Some people say that these were only made in limited batches. In fact, some say it was a group of audiophile monks in the Tibetan mountains that happened to get lost one day in a snowstorm. So what better way to spend their time than to make, power amplifiers, tuners, and preamps. And I'm glad they did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had such cool gear that came out of the silver era of hi-fi during the 70s. Others actually say that the circuit boards are comprised of rare minerals that were actually mined during the Apollo space mission. Now, a few will tell you there's a secret setting on the volume knob, and for those who know that the manufacturer actually had to remove the silk screening that said 11 because, people were just getting too excited, during late night parties in the 70s, and they're cranking it up and blowing speakers, and warranty claims were far too high. So they had to kind of just be done with that whole 11 thing. All that I know is that they're absolutely, I was going to say correct, cool. So I want to share with you what it took to get the trio up and running, because these things had been in a long slumber. We're talking 20 plus years. So, they weren't just kind of singing right away. So I'll go through that and the features. I want to share with you some of the features, what makes these unique and special. I want to share a little bit about how I believe these sound, with the initial kind of, listening of the set, and what they happen to be worth if you happen to try to find a pair or a set of these today, and ultimately whether or not they deserve a place in your vintage audio collection. All that in a wee bit more right here on the Vintage Vibe. Stick around. All right, what we have here is a Supreme Series, component series, the 700M power amplifier, the 700C control amplifier, and 700T tuner. Now these three came from an older gentleman who used to be a rep for these products, and he owned these since new. So I'm just about to take them outside, open up the cabinets, give them a light dusting inside, get a peek of what they look like. I'll show you that in a moment. And then next they'll be cleaned up, all the switches, controls, with some deoxit. And we'll look over some of the basics, like what the capacitors look like and the boards. And then we're going to try to test them and see whether or not they're in operating condition. Right off the bat, this tuner is heavy. I'm talking similar to integrated amplifiers of the area in weight. I am told it's a digital tuner. At least that's what the gentleman had mentioned to me, although it obviously has analog dials, analog tuning wheel on it. We'll open it up and we'll take a peek at it in just a moment. A little note, I found this interesting. The back side of all the screws have got these little plastic or neoprene type washers on it, and I honestly got the feeling as I was undoing these that they have never been taken out before, that the top of this unit has never been removed, which is kind of neat in terms of its originality. Okay, and with the cover off, you can see it has
another cover on it. This is definitely different built than the 600T Supreme Series tuner that normally is found with the 600 integrated amplifier. It certainly looks really well kind of packaged, and I'm guessing this is for the most part for shielding. We're going to take this apart and take a look down further inside. All right, so the top is off, and you can really start to appreciate some of the build quality. I mean, this is a decent sized transformer. I mean, I've seen similar sized transformers, quite frankly, in receivers, and you can really see that there's more to it than just what you see here, because you know, we have the whole bottom portion of the chassis as well, which explains why it weighs so much. So just going to give her a little cleaning, look her over, but just kind of at first glance, I mean, everything looks pretty original. I don't see any replaced capacitors. You can see some of the I don't know what you want to call that kind of red stuff, but it holds the position of the little trim pot here. It's all still kind of in place. Same here. So I don't think really anything's been touched. Here's the tuning capacitor underneath here. I'm not sure if it's a 5 gang. I'm going to assume it's at least 5 FM gangs, but we'll see what happens. Okay, this is the underside of the 700T. You can see some relays there. This is probably a de-emphasis switch, I'm going to guess. Number of boards, quite a heavy-duty tuning wheel there. And we can see some really healthy sized capacitors. I mean, this is a really overbuilt tuner, and I can't say I've actually seen a tuner that is built to this extreme. The 700T, it's quite possibly one of the most overbuilt tuners I've seen in all my years of audio collecting. Quite something. Okay, so we do have 5 FM gangs on the tuning capacitor, and it is a synthesized tuner, so it's digital, but it's analog. So there is a crystal oscillator in here, actually a couple of them from what I understand, and that's doing kind of the digital tuning, for lack of better words, in kind of an analog manner too. So it's an interesting tuner. Not really quite sure of the circuit, you know, the design of this one. I haven't really done a lot of research on it myself, but just giving it a good glance in here, it looks like quite a well-built tuner. Now, I have heard rumors that the 600T is a better performer, which would really surprise me. I've had a few 600Ts, so I'll be able to give this thing a good listen once I get in there and clean up the controls next. Got the 700C now out, nowhere near the girth of the tuner, interestingly enough, but still, you know, significant kind of weight to it for a preamplifier anyways. We're going to take off the top, give it a quick look inside, blow out all the dust, and get this one ready now to bring inside the house for a cleaning as well. Kind of the same thing. We've got a top within the top, protecting all the controls and circuits, I'm assuming from interference and such. We have a relay down here, a couple capacitors, and a transformer separate to the main circuits or components of the preamplifier. So the circuit boards on this, very kind of clean and simplistic, quite frankly. Molex connectors, so the boards can be separately removed and serviced if one wanted, which makes it a little bit easier. It's very modular looking, quite honestly, and it looks like another cover here protecting where all the RCA inputs are going to be and outputs. Again, that's probably to shield them, we're going to take off this cover here to get into where the controls are to get a peek at that. Okay, so that one's off. You can see the switches here, easy to access. Again, same Molex type connectors holding the circuits in place for the boards. Some more little switches here. And you can see one potentiometer there. There'll probably be a couple underneath that we have to gain access to down here, which means the bottom cover will have to end up coming off. And I'm expecting there's more kind of circuitry underneath of this unit here. Again, quite overbuilt for a preamplifier. Quite interesting what looks to be this secondary relay here. Never really seen that in a preamp myself, but we'll pop off that cover and identify exactly what it is and give it a cleaning as well as part of the process. Okay, on the back side, you can see we've got good access here to all of our switches, which I know we're gonna need to clean for sure. Bottom side of the main board. You can see a few other boards in here, again, Molex connectors, so they can be removed and inspected, which is great. A whole whack of fuses, and what I'm assuming is probably part of the power supply down here. And all in all, again, everything's looking original. I'm assuming this one's been opened up before, just because there's some little marks on the inside of the top when I removed it, and that was probably to get at switches and controls. But I don't really see any residue on here from previous cleanings or anything like that. I mean, everything looks really, really nice. So anyways, we're going to blow that out, put the bottom back on it, and then this one is good to come inside too to get ready for its cleaning. Now, it's great to have a 700C, a 700T, but let's face it, if you're buying the 700 series, it's probably, for this guy right here, the Mac Daddy of them all, the 700M. This is a M for monster. It is heavy. It's got to weigh at least 65, nearly 70 pounds, I'm going to guess. And before I open it up, I mean, this is just really cool. As the gentleman who I purchased this from had told me, he's the original owner, he said that this line of components were special order, and unfortunately they didn't do very well because people just didn't understand what they were capable of, and they were expensive. The Kenwood name really wasn't associated with this type of quality, but you know, he's owned it for for its whole life, and although he misses it, it's just something that he hasn't used in about 20 years. So let's open it up and take a peek at what 20 years of sitting around looks like. Actually, I've seen a lot worse. This has just got you know, the average kind of dust embedded in it. A truly massive transformer. You can kind of see my hand in comparison. This is a big one, and I do not see where the main filter capacitors are, so they're either underneath this cover here or they're underneath the chassis. But we're going to give this a quick cleaning, and then we'll take underneath a quick peek. Okay, so you can see the capacitors down in here and just how large they actually are. These are quite massive. Common for the time to have real big capacitors, but these are right up there. They rank with you know, what I've seen in some of the big Pioneers and other things like that. Quite dusty down in here. As for the driver boards, which we see on either side of the transformer, that's what I'm assuming they are just from glancing. And then you can see the little boards here for the outputs. All the outputs look matched. They're NECs. And what I'm noticing though on here, I don't know if you can see it, there's a lot of that kind of brown goo, and that could be a glue that they use, like in some of the Sansuis, that actually could get corrosive. But when I look down in here, I don't know if we can do a zoom on it or not, but there's a couple capacitors down in here that are looking a little suspect. One in particular, a small little guy in there, looks like it might have leaked, and I see some corrosion on some of the legs of the transistors and stuff in there. So there may be some components that need to be replaced on this thing. But all in all, it's a nice original example. Quite Quite an engineering marvel. Okay, as you can see on the underside here, there's not a lot to really see. Underside of this board here, which is likely for meter control, a couple potentiometers. You can kind of see another view of the outputs here. This is likely the 4 screws that hold the transformer in place. So here we go. I've got the preamp right here, matching tuner, voila, with this really cool adjustable dimmer, and the big bad power amplifier down below here. Unfortunately, I can't give you a peek right now at the glow of the front because the dials, the illumination is 0 because the bulbs are burnt out. But yes, those 4 bolts hold down that massive power transformer inside this amp, which I think is part of the secret to the Kenwood 700M, is just a really robust power supply, ability to deliver music in spades with deep authoritative bass. We'll go through more of that a little bit later on. My apologies, as you can see here, kind of in the basement, got a few things on the go, including a pair of Altec Valencia speakers, which I'll share with you one of the next times we get back here. But I'm going to take you through some of the service on this. Right now we're just kind of got it set up here, listening to it a little bit, making sure it's functioning okay. Let's take a look at what we ran into in servicing these units next. All right, so we got the 700T here, and I've started disassembling. A couple things to kind of be aware of. If you are trying to clean, for example, the front glass on this, there's actually kind of 2 glass pieces. There's the one here, as well as one actually in the faceplate of the unit, which is, you know, attached to the aluminum faceplate itself. This is real glass, so be particularly careful when taking off these screws on either side to release the glass, because there is kind of a rubber seal behind here, and since this rubber is probably as old as the tuner, what ends up happening is the glass will stick to this rubber, and as you're pulling it away, you can actually kind of chip away little bits of the glass. I did a tiny little piece, and I did a little correction with some kind of clear coat from nail polish. Did the trick to fill it in. All the bulbs are working. There's a couple bulbs kind of on either side here, so I don't have to change those. We're going to clean individually all the knobs. I've already started cleaning all the controls for the unit, and I'll give you an idea what that looks like underneath here just in a moment. So this is, in my opinion, a wonderfully overbuilt unit. Some say that the Supreme Series 600 actually were better sounding tuners. I don't know yet because we haven't listened to it. But what I do know is getting to the potentiometers, which we see kind of here, the switches and the controls. Here we got a couple more switches. Another one back in here and another pot down here. Relatively easy to get in there and spray it with a control cleaner of sorts like this right here. This one here will clean and lubricate. So I've chosen that in this instance. Otherwise, all the boards themselves at this point look like they're in decent condition. I don't see any obvious kind of leaking of any capacitors or any sort of traces, you know, that have lifted in terms of solder joints or anything like that. So I'm just now going to kind of reassemble this unit, and then we're going to get to testing it. Okay, so here is the faceplate. Just got it kind of resting here on my lap to give you a view. And you know, aside from little bits of foam that kind of deteriorate and break down, which is very easy to replace, you can buy this type of weather stripping at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like that. Aside from that, there's really not much to do to this unit. Again, just give the glass a clean. Be very careful with that because the glass is real again on these. And what I'm also going to do is just give the whole faceplate a really good cleaning, get that shine back on the faceplate before we put it on. And we have some of the knob sitting here, which I'm going to take time to clean up as well too. Just a little soap and water with a toothbrush before we start to assemble all the components. The good news when you're reassembling this is most of the screws are similar, aside from a couple odd ones like these that I'm placing in right now at the top of the faceplate, which are kind of a flat-headed screw. So I like to keep everything separate just so it's easier to get all back together. And again, really take your time to fit on this faceplate nicely. You don't want to put added pressure on the glass on it. And usually what does get hung up on these is just the push button switches, so you have to just very gently finesse those as you're placing this faceplate on. So we got the faceplate all cleaned. I'm just going to finish putting together a few last pieces here, and I'll be right back. Okay, the 700C control amplifier we've got on the table now. I've started servicing just regular maintenance stuff, cleaning stuff like these guys here, the potentiometers. There's a couple more here. And these are fairly easy to clean and access. Essentially, when you turn the knob here, this shaft, as you can kind of see along here, rotates. And as that rotates, there are particularly kind of here, there's little basic kind of copper discs, we're going to call it. And there's a wiper, and it slides underneath these contacts. And when it gets oxidized, that's when you get intermittent channels, sound cuts in and out, so on and so forth. So those look good. Now this here, I'm a little bit worried about. This is the volume control. I don't know if you can see it clearly here, but this is a sealed unit. In order to service this, you would have to essentially remove all these wires, so desolder, which is always fun. Remove it from the actual faceplate, and then you'd have to pry it open essentially. There's little kind of metal, I don't know if we can see it here, prongs that hold this together in all four corners. And then when it comes apart, you basically have ball bearings. I can tell that because I can hear it here. That's for the stepped attenuator. You're going to have little wipers like we have similarly in these, but sometimes they're not permanently affixed. They're held in place by pressure, or sometimes springs, different stuff like that. So hopefully we don't have to do that. On the back side here, there's some other potentiometers. Those are likely level outputs, probably for things like the headphone, possibly for mic control. I'll have to double check those and give those a clean as well too. We've checked the fuses, they look pretty good. And on the top, so I've moved this down, same deal. We've got these little contacts here. You can see these little guys jumping up and down slightly as I move the levers right here. These are fairly difficult to get in and clean. I've never really found a great way to do it, except spraying kind of a little bit of contact cleaner in, where you have access holes like these here and kind of right here, and then just work it back and forth. This is the control here for the auxiliary, tuner, phono. It's the input switch, so we've cleaned that, as well as a balance right over here and a power switch over here. And last but not least is this relay, and I think this is really cool because never have I ever been able just to pull a relay and remove it like that. Typically these are soldered, these individual terminals, to wires which go to the board. This is a female connector which allows you just to plug it in and remove it, which is awesome because now I can take a couple little screwdrivers and pry this out and take a look at it. Okay, we got the lid off this guy here, and these are little contacts right in here, and you can kind of see on an angle, rather than being copper colored on the flat portions where this copper kind of plates are, these two plates, these are the contacts, they've turned black. So we're probably having an issue with this relay. and this could be a reason why we weren't getting sound. So I'm going to clean these contact points by spraying a business card with deoxit and slowly sliding it in and out of the contact here, in between this little brass piece here that I'm pushing on and the little round brass head. And hopefully we can save this relay, because these aren't always easy to find, especially one like this that, you know, just kind of plugs in. This is a special little relay. Now, unfortunately, removing it, you can see there I've kind of broke off the plastic on either side right here as I was prying gently up on the case. We didn't break the case, but the plastic's starting to get old, and likely the reason why it just kind of broke when I put a little pressure on it. Regardless, it will hold back together just fine. We're going to give that a clean and put it back in. Okay, so a cleaning of the controls on this preamplifier really did nothing. So what I've started doing is I've removed each board and inspected the actual solder points. And some of them look like they either were worked on before, like this one here where we've got a lot of dark spots, or that's perhaps how it came out of the factory. It's hard to tell. This one little joint kind of back here was a little suspect looking, so otherwise this board looked fine. But most of the boards had, you know, 2 or 3 spots, you know, here or there that might have been a little suspect. Nothing that looked horrible. We're going to go with this tone board next, because I did see at least 2 or 3 on there that I'd like to reflow as well too. And then we're going to retest this thing again, hopefully pass a signal through it. Okay, I want to give you a close-up of what I'm starting to see here. And this is why I know this has been worked on at one time. You start seeing the solder points start getting really quite amateur the further we go down here. Let's see if we can get some light on some of these. And some of them, in fact, as I get right over into this area here, get pretty ugly. And there's one right there where it looks like they've overheated the solder point and lost some of the tracing, which is where you see that brown, and just done a little dab. Stuff like that is what concerns me. And when a board has been damaged like that, sometimes the only way to repair it is to use, for example, wire and kind of jump from one spot to other, bypassing the board itself. But I'm going to kind of cross my fingers. I'm going to first, because that's sometimes what we do, I'm going to first attend to this one here where I do see some solder points that are a little sketch. And that corresponds with the input selector switch, which could be a reason why I'm just not passing any signal if it's not switching from source. But we're going to try that. And then worst case scenario, we're going to come back over here, avoiding it because we would have to remove these bottom kind of knobs right across here and unbolt this board from the board, removing it from the top. It's pretty tight and difficult to do. Okay, there's the minor repair to that board there. We've just used a jumper wire. Like I said, these solder points are in pretty rough shape. There's only so much we can do, but I do not think we have any cold solders or anything like that at this point. The ones that we could touch up, we did. And we're going to put this tone board back into the preamp. Okay, now all these boards along the top have also been now inspected. Been looking for, again, any suspect solder joints. That could be the reason why we're not passing a signal. All we get is a little bit of hiss, kind of like white noise or tube brush. Nothing really was horrific looking. What I mean by that is, you know, when you see a bad solder, it kind of looks like a volcano. There's a gap all the way around whatever it is that you're soldering. That wasn't the case here, but we did find a few that were suspect. Went ahead and fixed them. So now we're going to just reassemble and test it again. Well, got this one put back together, and it is playing. So we're got signal passing through both channels nice and clean. 1 kilohertz test tone, and then we switched over to run some music through it, and it sounds pretty good. So one down and one more to go. The 700C is put back together. Everything went quite well. Everything's nicely clean, shined up, just a little bit of detergent and water with a toothbrush. That's all you need. This guy here gave me a little bit of a hassle because the shaft itself had some kind of indentations on it from these Allen keys being tightened up there. I call them an Allen key. Basically, your Allen key goes into here, and it's a little threaded piece of metal that tightens down onto the shaft that the controls all sit on. So I had to use a little bit of sewing machine oil on the shaft to lubricate it. I actually tightened this whole volume potentiometer tighter in place as well too, because it was shaking a little bit before. Now it's not, and it looks pretty good. It's working as it should. And next thing we're going to do is move to the 700M. So here is the Kenwood 700M, a complete monster. It's been in a slumber for a while. I'm going to do a couple basic tests. I've got the speakers turned off. I've got a frequency generator. It's called a warble tone generator by Techniques. And I've got it set for a 1 kilohertz test tone. It has RCAs that go at the back, so I just put that to the amplifier input. And what we're trying to do is just see if we have any response at the meters. And as you can see, the meters are responding. There's about 6 on the level. I'm going to do now right channel, 6, and we look like we have equal output for left and right channel right now. Now we're going to try to see if we can actually pass a signal. I have no reason to believe why we wouldn't at this point. There's left channel. There's right channel. Okay. That's great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to check for any DC at the speaker terminals. And I'll explain to you what that means in a moment. Basically, right probe to positive, black probe to negative, and we're going to read in millivolts DC 0.044. Okay, now let's do the opposite channel, and we're going to see if we are similar. Okay, so the right channel definitely has a little bit more DC at the output than the left channel. Ideally closer to 0 is probably optimal on the meter. I wouldn't be too concerned if it was up around 20, even 40. But as we start creeping over 50, 60 and so on and so forth, it's telling us that the unit itself may have some capacitors that are not 100% up to par today and is in need of some restoration. DC to the outputs to your speakers can blow speakers out. So, not bad for an amplifier that's been sitting for 20 years. I'm going to leave this idling for about 5 minutes. I'm going to recheck the DC at the outputs because it usually will stabilize after a while, and we're going to see what the final reading is. So the final measurements, I was less than 10 on the left channel and about 26 on the right channel. I will adjust them to make it balanced and equal, but that's not too bad considering these capacitors all look original, look a little suspect. Some of them, that's the left and right driver boards. These capacitors here, original, obviously huge. If we look at a pop can and we compare it, well, they really are the size of a pop can, not kidding you, and about the same in height if I was to put the can down in there. It's a really nice laid out amplifier in terms of being symmetrical. Some big heat sinks. They're not running warm right now. Look to be original outputs. They all kind of feel the same. These lamps are all burnt out, which is a little peculiar. But aside from that, I'm really happy considering this has sat for 20 years. And yeah, those lights are burnt out. And it seems to be just a-okay. Actually, I'm going to check to see if we have voltage there at the bulbs before I say yes, the bulbs are burnt out. Other than that, well, we're going to take it apart, clean it, shine it up, get some last pictures, and then we'll have a chance to evaluate this, how it sounds, and the other components, and be able to get back to you on that shortly. So right now what I'm doing is I am checking the bias on this amplifier, and I'm going to adjust the bias. And how we basically do that on the 700M is behind, well, let me get a stick, something not conductive. Behind these transistors here at the front, there's a test point here. And behind these transistors at the back, there's a test point here. We basically just connect the multimeter to it, put the setting in DC volts. Right now we're reading 0.07 volts or 70 millivolts. And we want to get this number at about 50. And we're going to give this thing a little bit to kind of level off first to warm up. And then what we will do is we will adjust this trim pot right here till we achieve the 50 here, and then we know we're biased correctly. And same thing on this side. You can see there's a test point here and a test point here just behind the transistors, and we got our trim pot here.
All right, so there you have it. The 700 series units kind of up and alive. This is part of the love of vintage audio, is that they are temperamental, mostly because they've been sitting typically for years. Components expire. Sometimes you have to pull them apart and redo stuff. I have to go back in there actually and hunt for one bad solder point or a couple of them, which I think is on the FM board of the tuner. It acts up a little bit when it's cold. Once it warms up, works perfectly for the rest of the day or however long you have it on. But again, that's just part of the learning process with this stuff and why I love it anyways. So because the video's gone like 36 minutes, I'm going to do a part 2. I'm going to post it this week. That's going to be features, what it takes to find one of these, what they're worth, how does it sound, is it worth a place in your vintage audio collection. We'll see you very soon. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe.